This is about Queensland and Fiji's sugar mills in the 1960s and 70s. Seems so long ago, doesn't it? But I won't say much more about it. But Roderick Smith, front and centre, please.
Should be seeing a map of all of the Queensland sugar mills. I think it came out of Light Railways. It's a fairly old map. Several of them in the south have closed, and a lot more since have closed in the north or merged. So,
All good, Rod.
good. Right, in 1956, my family relocated to Queensland for a Melbourne winter, partly for my health. We went by first class train the whole way from Melbourne to Cairns and back, with assorted side trips on branch lines. I was already a railway enthusiast. I'd been line siding steam at Narnagoon, Eastern Victoria, and watched the diesels come through and then watched the electrification come through. So this really reinforced an existing enthusiasm, and one magic memory, we pulled up beside a sugar mill with red and green steam locos, which I deduce has to have been Mulgrave. No other mill is beside the main line. So that stayed with me. So through light railways, other clubs, slide nights, we were watching the decline of steam on the cane lines, and the moment I had a car, the very next holiday, off to Bundaberg, the major pocket of steam. Followed that up with the next car and the further north to the Ingham area, which was the other major pocket, and then lots of holidays ever since chasing sugarcane railways. It's a magic world for anybody. For a Victorian, there's that glorious blue skies, sun, and vivid landscapes. And what is it? Beautiful one day, perfect the next. Now, it's not always. There are wet days. Right, on we go then. You've digested the map. We're doing them in the order of this. We're coming from the north to the south. So the sugar industry was a big deal for Australia, a major export earner. Even today, we are the world's fourth largest exporter of sugar. 80% of the Australian crop is exported. It's worth $2 billion a year, which is interesting. It's only equals 22nd for export value, partly because since the 1950s it's been overtaken by so much iron ore, coal, minerals. It's still very important. So Commonwealth Trades Alphabet, for those of us who are baby boomers, we grew up on this in primary school and wrote in, and the sugar industry always made sure it had the front page by writing its jingle to start with letter A. So A is for active. Boys and girls, busy all the day, sugar gives them energy for both work and play. Well, I wrote in, there's no railway photo on that flyer, but there certainly was in the coloured things I got in the mail. So, now we're not in time sequence, we're in geographical sequence. So, starting at Mossman Mill in the north, now, the special thing here, it was the only mill in moving into the machine cut cane to use demountable bins that could be carried on a tractor in the field or on the cane wagons on the railway. The others used different methods. Daintree and E.M. Baldwin. So this was 83. It was the third of my long drives to Queensland, this time with yet another Holden station wagon, sleep in the back while two of us shared the driving and drove 24 hours straight to get to Queensland. Now, this was one of the mills to create a tourist operation, Ballyhooly Express. I've forgotten which of the southern mills provided the loco that was used. Bundaberg Fowler, and there were only ever, 7, 8 or 9 of them. John Browning, feel free to press the space bar anytime I gloss over something. So it had 2 programs. In the morning, they went north from the mill to the golf links, where we all had morning tea in the golf clubhouse. And in the afternoon, it went south to the Port Douglas. So this is my morning northbound ride. Mossman River. I don't know if it was crocodile infested or not. We didn't jump in. So they did run around. That's the classic servicing. Back into town again. And now south from Mossman itself was Port Douglas, which has become very touristy, marina, luxury resorts, and the commuter was using a revived original Port Douglas tramway alignment with new track laid on it, linking to the Mossman track, and it ran past the front gates of a lot of those resorts. So instead of driving and trying to find a park, people could go into the restaurants in town or the marina and their cruise out to the reef. So it was doing quite a genuine commuter job. And this now is Ballyhooly on its afternoon run. Victoria Mill Loco. And the two together at, presumably that's St Crispin, not Port Douglas. Can't be certain. I think it is Port Douglas. Now this is at the junction where the Port Douglas reincarnation joined the existing mill trackage, as there was a steady decline in this operation. First the junction got pulled out, then the commuter railway regressed to weekends only and volunteer crew, and now it's gone completely. So crossing a genuine cane train as we headed back. So this is 83. Machine cut's pretty well taken over by now. So it's two from Martin Bennett. I've got them back to front. Most of the photos are mine. The ones a lot I've got from either friends or the light railway members, because these were originally contributed when I was doing Rail News Victoria. They didn't get into the mag, but they've got here tonight. And just a glimpse there of a rare but not completely uncommon economical layout. No points at the far end. Both tracks feed onto the turntable. All right, coming back to Cairns, I'm just diving inland briefly. Yungaburra up on Atherton Tableland, Sawmill with Trolleyway. The Tableland had two major industrial empires. One of them was the Chillago Mining Company, QR Gauge. It eventually got taken over and trackage was extended to Forsyth, which is still there. And the other, of course, we had from the presentation from John Dennis, Stannery Hills and Irving Bank, narrow gauge for mining. So just a brief look at the Forsyth line, because it was run under light railway principles, even though it was the government railway. They had four of these diesel mechanical locos. In their final form, they had the Gardner 153 horsepower diesel, which was the same as we had in Rail Motors in Victoria. And it was and a lot of boats, and there were a lot of applications. They've all survived. I think one of them's on a tourist line in the south. One of them has gone to the Croydon to Normanton. I'm not sure where the others are. So Croydon to Normanton is also famous, run under light railway principles. The steam locos were withdrawn in the 1920s or 30s, and the railway ran with rail motors ever since. But the one in my view here is the standby, the older. A slightly more recent version of the same style was doing the service when I was there, and now it's been upgraded to much more modern equipment again. It's gone touristy. So leaving Cairns now, our mill's working towards the south. Hambledon Mill at Edmonton has succumbed to the success of Cairns. The housing sprawl of Cairns has come this far. There's no cane left to harvest or mill. It's all housing. So this particular one is off-season. That's a works train heading out to maintain the tracks ready for the new season. And the mill itself, this one was from my brother. He was there with the school excursion in Cairns, so of course Edmonton was the mill they could visit. That is actually a simplex with an additional extended cab so that they could see over the cane wagons. Preserved at Edmonton, that is Hambledon Loco, and I think it's still on that same site, owned by the local council. And unlike a lot of others that succumb to the weather, at least it has a roof over it. A lot of locos which I have photographed plinth in parks became a liability and too much deterioration, and they've gone to all sorts of tourist railways and private owners and are in various stages of being restored. So Sugar World was a sugar museum associated with the mill, catching the tourist market. They had this passenger train that had two programs. I'm doing the Quick and Easy, which is a circuit around the mill site. They also went out to somewhere as an out and back, but I didn't match my times. And that will be a brake wagon there. That's the way they run the longer rakes and heavier rakes nowadays. You have a loco at the front that's increasingly more powerful and a brake wagon at the back. The wagons themselves are not braked. Now, most interesting photo that I just happened to take in 1968, that loco was retrieved, restored, tanks removed, converted to tender operation, and the firing was converted to, I think, natural gas, not oil. And it started running tourist services on this railway. So this is Mulgrave Mill at Gordonvale, which has picked up what Edmonton cane has survived, comes here now to be milled. And this also extends its tentacles a long way south. It's, I think, a success and quite major. So there is the loco you saw in a park many years further on, and I didn't recognise it until John alerted me it was the same beast. And not only is it, I think, gas-fired, it runs with single crew, and that person was a lady the day I went. So it goes quite a long way up the Mulgrave River Valley, and they put a spur into an orchid farm as the tourist destination. It was a brilliant operation, but like a lot of these, went under, when the insurance went up, and I think the insurance went up because of the global financial crisis, all of these operations ceased. We will see later there is one vaguely tourist operation. Victoria Mill has kept some equipment which will run for company purposes, not for the general public and not to a schedule. And it's just recently visited a different mill network altogether. So it's available as a calling card. So here we are leaving Gordonvale. In putting this together, it's hard to tell which manufacturer dominated in Queensland. There were so many. A few were quite minor. Fowler, though, did very well, including getting the orders licence built in Bundaberg. And Hudswell Clark seems to be well up on the list, but I haven't tried to do any accurate statistics. Now we're crossing an Anna branch of Mulgrave River. The main river flows right of frame, and I believe this bridge was damaged severely in floods. The railway can't operate past this point anymore, not unless they rebuild the bridge. So that is the orchid farm. I didn't go to see the farm, I was photographing the train. Mulgrave still. The way I'm captioning these, the first of a mill I'm captioning, the rest will not necessarily be captioned because we're still on the same mill. But because we've got viewers here who've been to cane fields and viewers who haven't and viewers who've never been to Australia. So I've got to try and give you some of the flavour of what the whole scene is like. It's not just a kaleidoscope of locomotives. Now, we've got several here from Jeff Bounds. He's been to Cairns twice in recent years. That's one of the Queensland Railway's prolific DH class. That their job on QR evaporated. They were shunting locos and nothing needs shunting and the lightweight branches are closed. They've been cascaded to all sorts of industrial purposes. This one would have been regauged but never has been. It's just increasingly derelict. There's one on Puffing Billy. So still Mulgrave train near Babinda, which is the next mill down. Now, it's interesting that I remembered green and red from the 50s because they're all green and yellow today. So to Babinda, Plinth Fowler, looking good. Took me an hour to take this photo. The whole thing was overgrown with tall grass, whatever it is. We'd call it Kampungi, I think, in Victoria. And I had to trample and trample and trample to get a photographical angle. That's Noah Onstein and Koppel. I was able to identify that one because you can see the number 4. O&K had a sprinkling in Queensland. It also had locos elsewhere in Australia. It must have been a reasonably active exporter, but it didn't dominate Queensland. Now to Innisfail, and a slightly different flavour. The Innisfail tramway was run by QR as a common carrier railway, not just Cane, and eventually it all got offloaded. So this loco was still in service in 63. It was one of 3 of the class. So when I was there in 68, this time that's not driving, that was as a uni student with a sunshine, with an all lines ticket. A lot of remnants of the tramway were still there. It was only 5 years ago since closure. Passenger carriage, ubiquitous demountable sewer bins, which you'll see in several places because these could be transferred to QR for either shipping to Brisbane or to the coastal ports where the export ships came in, because sugar from the mills was refined in a couple of places in Australia. I think Brisbane had a refinery, Melbourne had a refinery, came around by coastal ship, not by train. 2 more of those locomotives. In fact, the remaining 2, there were only 3 of them. Now, I'm not sure, parts of that tramway may have been taken over when the North Coast Line came through. In Cairns, the North Coast Railway was built on the alignment of a former local tramway, although that's now been bypassed as it's gone off the roads and into following the waterfront. And there was something special about this, and I can't think what. Innisfail, now Gundy Millers at Innisfail, and that's one of their Hudswell Clarks. It's now operational in Victoria on a private tramway. Strath Creek, I think, has got it, and they rebuilt it with tanks. It's not a tender loco anymore. So Gundy was walkable, and of course I didn't have a vehicle, so I spent quite a bit of time, because 1968 you could just wander into a mill and made welcome. There weren't many people there. It was off season. There'll be a couple of maintenance people around. Crew carrier for the track gangs. I think I never did identify that diesel. For those of you who aren't Australian, you will notice the water bag hanging on the handrail, typical of a lot of rural Australian railways. The evaporation kept the water cool. And the ubiquitous DH71. I thought they were all DH71s until David Gian's excellent presentation. There are variations, but I think that's a classic, one of the majority. I could have identified this one, but haven't. One of those places where the railway goes past the pub. So I got this one from a pub group where I'm a regular contributor. So South Johnson Mill. I haven't got a shot either of this pub or of this railway. That's why I had to borrow one to gap fill in this presentation. And now we jump. My only photo of Marillion Mill, and it's here in Melbourne. This was imported quite a long time ago. Came south with the carriages are Mulgrave Rambler carriages, and the locos from Marillion, the only representation I've got for that mill. And it came for a tourist project, which I believe was to run under the Westgate Bridge, past the golf links that are under the bridge. Never got off the ground. They had this stored under cover at Long Island, got evicted. So here they are in the open, smothered with graffiti. The preparation here has involved removing the graffiti. I will not glorify their vandalism. So you notice, it's at Tully Mill, one I haven't visited, so I've relied on James, our member. I hope he's here tonight. And quite recent also from James, he was there only a couple of weeks ago. The mill was celebrating its centenary, and here's the visitors' caller card. The Hutswell Clark from Victoria Mill, Homebush, looking a lot shabbier, and gee, how overshadowed by modern diesels. They used to look so large 40 years ago. So now to one of the big ones. This is my 1975 long drive to Ingham for the major Dean Pocket. I think they're under common management. Victoria Mill is south of Herbert River. McNade is north. There's a bridge across because any McNade imports or exports have to come across Victoria Mill trackage. And the way cane entitlements work, a McNade train could well go through Victoria to reach its own entitlement. So it's very much mix and match. So the big distinguishing feature, McNade locos were numbered, Victorian Mill locos were given names. So there's sugar containers. And I think that's outbound, hence they're loaded. That's the famous Herbert River Bridge. Lots of railway enthusiasts have photographed there. The mill is only just on the far side, or this side. I think that's bound for the mill. This is in the mill. In action. The problem with machine cut cane is once it's cut, it's got a very short life. Once you've cut it, it's got to be milled within 24 hours. Now, my experience in Indonesia, they were still on long cut. Even when they were bringing stuff into the mill by road, they'd put the long cut cane onto wagons because the wagons could feed through the crusher on it 24/7, but the cutters and the transport was on a daytime roster. So this is climbing up of the Herbert River Bridge, still McNade. I'm told that there are floodgates here. I haven't seen them, but they may not have been built when I was there in 75. Now we have another selection from James. He was up there, mainly McNade. We weren't able to identify positively, but I'm using James captions there. And that's a rebuilt government walker, but I don't think it's one of the Queensland DHs. It might be from Western Australia. It doesn't look so large there, probably because he's used a telephoto lens, but it is large, and there's balanced nicely on the 2 foot 610mm. Back to tradition. Now that may be one of the larger variants of the classic, and I think it's been recabbed. Now back to 1968. This was one of the triple gauge sections which linked a mill to Queensland Railways, and I took that photo. What novelty! And that night I was riding on that wagon as one of the mill locos was taking out, I think, fuel tanks. It wasn't sugar season, so I think it was all to do with routine maintenance. That link has been removed. The triple gauge is no longer triple. The mill gauge remains. And I was able to locate this photo using Google Earth. That house is still there, but they've updated the windows. Now, there's various methods of protection for these crossings. I think normally a mill train had to stop, turn the signals that would stop any mainline traffic, cross over, and then reset the mainline signals. Some of them actually got interlocked in a program. And there's one, which is I think the one at Ingham Station, where it is always set for the mill trackage. It needs special moves for when Queensland wants to go through, and that includes today's tilting trains. So now to Victoria Mill. Some of the named logos. Homebush is the one we've been seeing at Victoria Mill in later life, maintained there. They're all of these have survived somewhere. There's a remarkable list of preserved Queensland sugar locos, some operational, some static, some are pretty decrepit, but they were a very popular item around Australia because they were manageable. Sydney is the one that went to Mossman to run Ballyhooly. Now, I don't know quite why we were there during harvesting season, and some of those were in use, but I think the rot was setting in, diesels were taking over, and possibly we weren't there in a peak week. So now we have a sequence from Clayton Giles, who went with a Victorian group, knowing that this was happening. It's an annual picnic event. He knew it was all predictable, and that's why they went. So that is Homebush in its preservation era. I don't know whether the general townspeople are invited or whether it's only mill employees and their families. Now this is Ingham Station, and this is the one John alerted me. It's now, I did ask, is it set for the tramway all year round or only during season? So Victoria Mill and parts of its extremities. The thing that amazed me with my trip to Bundaberg was just how efficient the whole operation was. Everything was done with radio dispatching, like an aeroplane. We didn't do that in southern states. We had to have forms of safe working with signalling, like double line block or tokens or anything. And here, You could have multiple trains in the one area at the one time. You just followed the instructions of the train controller. And one of the articles we had in Light Railways 2 years ago was about the modernisation of the cane industry and how it's got to keep up with efficiency, modernisation, technologies that are improving it. Now, this tail marker is an interesting flashback. In the long cut days, the rear wagon always had a few stalks going up vertically as the end marker, so the driver knew he hadn't had a derailment or a breakaway. Well, that's the equivalent today, although even that's been superseded because now you'd have a brake wagon at the back with radio control linkage from the cab. Now, this is the sugar terminal at Townsville, which had its own industrial shunting loco, much larger than our light railways, but it's private and it's sugar. Photographed from a passing ferry I was crossing to Magnetic Island. And while I'm coming south, I went sideways for 3 more industrials. Mount Isa Mine, which this is one of the older shunting locos. And another, this one's gone to a preservation, yes, QPSR, the tourist operation in the Brisbane suburbs at Box Flat. And even this one, which is one of those classic DHs, it's gone somewhere as well. So no, the shunting is now done by QR. So all of these privately owned, Mount Isa owned locos have been cascaded. Now, you used to be able to go down the copper mine at Mount Isa. I never did, but I believe they've no longer take you into the main mine, but they've got some sort of dummy mine open to give you some of the experience. Klondike is from Pioneer. It's the only steam I've got from Pioneer, and of course this is in Victoria. Cascaded. We couldn't work out if we can pick the gauge, we know the mill. One of them is 1067, the other is 610, but I couldn't pick the gauge from that angle. So we are at Calamia now, although that loco normally spends its time at Pioneer, and it's another one of these triple gauge operations to bring in molasses tanks for loading. And there's the same loco in its earlier life. It was built for Aramac Tramway in Western Central Queensland and got sold off. That tramway got closed and dismantled. Like so much of the Queensland branch line territory, that one was far sharp, not by QR, not run by QR, but all of those roads were impassable in the wet, and there was a lot of wet. But bit by bit, as the roads were upgraded and became passable, the reason for having these railways evaporated. And we've now shifted to Inkerman Mill. That one is privately owned and managed to run it on a suburban block in the Sydney suburbs. It's now relocated to Journey. I think a slightly larger block, but still suburban. And that's also Inkerman at the Puffing Billy Museum. And behind it are 2 of the Hudswells. So Inkerman from James. And I grabbed this one tonight when I realised I still had a gap. Proserpine Mill. So that's from our own Facebook site. Jeff I knew when he was a Victorian, relocated. And that was the only Proserpine entry I had up until this afternoon from another friend, Brian Webber. So there's the sugar. I'm not quite sure which way it's being transported, whether it's going by rail to Brisbane or it's being collected from a mill and it's going to an export port. And Farley, the only representative I've got of Farley, and I took it, it's my photo, but it's nowhere near Queensland. That's at Cobdogla in South Australia. The left hand, it's the centenary of Cobdogla's own loco that was bought for the Cobdogla Loveday Firewood Tramway, feeding the pumps, taking Murray water for irrigation. So that's their main loco. And they've got this one from Farley, and they've got another simplex from a different mill, but I didn't get a photo of it. Now, out of racecourse, now there's a cluster of several mills here in the immediate Mackay area, and they're all interlinked with their tracks. And it was very hard to unscramble which mill was which in my photos. That's the same loco, I think, or at least it's come from the same mill. This one is now in Victoria on the line at Redcliffs, which was regauged over a closed Victorian branch line. So originally the Mackay Railway, and it predated the North Coast Railway, it went inland. We had several branches from it, and it was principally a cane hauler. So into later life, and that was where there was its traffic, that was its revenue. So in later life, it got cut back to Marion and then cut back the whole way, and bits of it got gauge converted and taken over by the mills because that's where the traffic was going anyhow. So this is now inland, coming inland from Mackay. Now this one was fairly recent installation. It's a drawbridge crossing, which identifies it as Plaistow trackage. I don't know how many of these exist in Queensland. That's not the only one, but may have been the first. And there were two others at Stirling North that weren't activated very often and are now replaced. The reopened railway now comes underneath all of that in a trench. A Plaistow loco. It's no longer on that site, and apparently it's decaying. You can watch the rust creeping. So that's another Plaistow loco, gone to Puffing Billy, donated. So I'll pause for a moment so you can read both plates at the bottom for yourselves. And I got it in steam. This was one of their old time festival days. And so they had two of their steamable locos in steam. Racecourse. Now, I think racecourse is closed. There's been some amalgamations in that area and rationalising. I'm not sure which has survived and which has gone. And now my lovely Marion, we knew to expect Ingham. We knew to expect Bundaberg a few years earlier. We did not expect Marion. But we were there on a Sunday and it wasn't moving. So we carefully drafted our next few days to be back here on a steaming day. Apparently this one was steamable at the time, but not used except for work trains. And the one that we'll photograph steaming, this was its only duty. It didn't do field cane work. It was used to shunt on the dual gauge track, the exchange traffic with QR. Perry did pretty well with Queensland locos. It's one of the majors. South Australian builder. So that was the real novelty for a Victorian. I don't have many shots of the mills as such. I did when I went to Java, but in Australia, although I was fully allowed to wander through, I just didn't very much and didn't take any shots of mill equipment very much. So that's the site of Marion QR station today. The track's cut back. I'm in a QR rail motor on a charter. So we've got the balk there, and what's beyond has been converted for Marion Mill operation. In 1968, I went the whole way to the end at Netherdale. So that's Marion Mill as glimpsed from our passing train. And this is 1968, the Netherdale line at Gargett. I put this in because I did not have a photo of Cattle Creek Mill. And now we jump to North Eaton now, which is another in that Marion cluster and very confusable. And this was one of the prolific types, 100 of them, I think John said, built for World War I operation near the trenches and the Western Front, Belgium, Flanders, the lot. And this one came to Australia. It's quite rare, actually. Not many came to Australia. Well, this is the only one. And it's now at Ipswich, done up as part of the Transport Museum based on Ipswich workshops. Took us a while to decide this is North Eaton. We won't see much long cut cane until I reach the Bundaberg section, because that was taken in 71. That one's interesting. I think it's unique. It was built in Bundaberg, history repeating itself, but this time it's building a diesel. And it's a Jenbach from Austrian design, an Austrian prime mover in it. I think I've seen them in Java, but I think that may be the only one in Australia. Now that's North Eaton again, regauged QR track, an original QR shelter. Right, into Serena and Plain Creek Mill, which was interesting on many counts. The mill is just off the bottom of the photo. They've got another large holding yard off the top because the mill site was too congested to hold everything. And it's the site of a power alcohol distillery. I think that's been there from before World War II and is very important through World War II. I think it docked at aviation fuel. And in Victoria, we were making power alcohol from wheat at Warwick Nabil. So today, power alcohol, it's ethanol. It's a feedstock for other processes. Tramway Motel. Quite an antique, that one. Pre-war Fowler. Comenge. I'm not sure how well it muscled in onto the diesel market. Ian Baldwin did fairly well. So it's unrecognisable as a Fowler, but it is one. And again, quite a bit of tramping was needed to get the photographic angle. Now, that's another two locos disposed of. The nearer one is certainly a Fowler, but we're not sure about the further. And that's the mill. As I said, one of my few shots of a mill as a mill. So now it's a long way to the south now. There's the North Queensland cane pocket and the South Queensland. And in between, we have the lovely city of Rockhampton. And they've got the preserved Rockhampton steam tram at Archer Park Station. And at least in its early years, it was allowed to operate up the famous Denison Street trackage, which is where the main North Coast goes up. It's a back street, not the main street of Rockhampton, but it's the railway in the middle of the road. Back in the days, it was double track with no segregation from motor traffic. It's now single track, and a lot of it's been placed in reservation. And in from Rockhampton, we have Mount Morgan with copper mining, and that is a Mount Morgan mining loco that's been revived. It was running on section of this line when this line was bypassed by the Mara Short line. It lasted quite a while, but when it was closed, the section was kept here as a tourist operation. It doesn't operate as a tourist railway anymore, but the station is a railway museum with equipment on display. Now, I put this one in case we felt we'd better stop at Rockhampton. What's the real time, please? When I'm in screen share, I can't see the clock.
It is 9:06, Rod, but keep going. It's very, very interesting.
We're 2/3 of the way through.
That'll work fine.
So
keep going.
So, right, I'll put this one here just in case. This is eclectic. I couldn't put this set with any one mill. They've come from a whole lot. This is from the Steam Preservation Warwick Turner at Echuca. He has a whole lot of stuff on his site of steam equipment of all styles. So I was there on he's dead now, the top right-hand corner. I was at his funeral, and it was going to be an ashes scattering off paddle steamers because he'd been behind the recreation of the Echuca port as a tourist attraction. He'd also been behind steamboat preservation in Sydney. So 1/3 of his ashes we scattered here, 1/3 went to Sydney to be scattered on Sydney Harbour, and 1/3 to his property. So I don't think that the loco there was steamable. We got to ride his railway, but on this simplex. So now I've put the map in again for those of you who aren't Queenslanders. We pick up now to do the area south from Bundaberg, which of course was my first territory because it was closest to Melbourne. It's also, that area's lost more mills than the others. 4 of those have closed even before I knew them. So we now pick up with beautiful Bundaberg, yellow locos, glorious weather, green cane, blue sky. It was a magic holiday. So the 2 mills, I think they're under common ownership or management now. Quinaba was Queensland National Bank and Milliquin nearby, and there was a lot of interworking between the 2 and cooperation. I think heavy duty maintenance for one was done at the other. It had the facilities. So Perry. Now that loco should have been named, but the name was missing. It was restored by a later holiday. You know, interestingly, they're all coal-fired, possibly because Queensland has plentiful coal. Some mills use bagasse to fuel their locos, but I think Queensland, the bagasse was totally consumed by running mill steam machinery, and into a later era is what made kainite. That's where the name kainite came from, and that was such a successful building product in the 50s, they had to use pulped pine to make kainite. Out in the field. Now I've got a shot of the boiler on the frame. I didn't recognise it until I read the notes while preparing tonight, and there's no point putting in just a boiler on a frame when I'm running to a quota. They're just magic moments out in the field. And a night shot, no, I wasn't even going to try and correct the light, but the driver was a Victorian who I'd met on steam trips here in Victoria. Seasonally, he worked in Queensland, invited me up for an evening out on the field. We were out for, I think, 4 hours, just shunting backwards and forwards, and we were never out of sight of the top of the mill chimney. Next morning, at last, long cut cane. I promised you long cut cane. Well, there it is. Because all of that was a legend in Australian culture. Summer of the 17th Doll was about the cane cutters, the classics with the blue singlets. And interestingly, in a related hobby, Australia and Thailand were pioneers of anti-venin treatment for snake bite for the same reason. Sugar mills and sugar workers who got bitten. And that's what machine cut cane got rid of. Disused derrick because already other methods of loading were in force. My memory is that the Bundaberg fowlers were pretty gutsy locos. They romped away with those rakes, possibly more gutsy than the others, or the Hudswell Clarks may have equalled them. We were using Army survey maps. There was no Google Earth then, or laptops. We were relying on the Army survey maps for our navigation, and we did pretty well. That one got a nice comment. I'll put that one up as the trailer for tonight onto the Facebook site, and somebody identified all of the components for me. That's his comment. I just cut and pasted it from Facebook to here. Classic D871. Or... Now, much later holiday, and finally Queensland, beautiful one day, pouring wet this day. I don't know how I got any photos. In fact, the reason this is during the season, and they weren't harvesting that day. It was too wet for anything to work in the fields, so the railway wasn't running. You can see the falling rain. I don't know what I was standing under so that I wasn't drenched getting the photo. Three plates. I'll pause for a bit. That way. Sip a drink. You can read the top one. I had to type that one. You can't read it. 6160 of 1948. The other one's 1850 of 1946. You don't have to read those links. They'll be up in the chat. I've sent the text through to Mike and he'll put it up in an accessible place. Now in Victor we will see, or have seen, we'll see. Yes, there. That's the Bundaberg's tourist operation in the gardens. I think I had to grab that one from the Facebook site. I've been there and I cannot find the whole holiday when I went to Bundaberg. So it suffered a lot of damage in one of the major floods, but they're rebuilt and they're back on deck now, quite happily. But they had to do quite a bit of work. So Milliquin in 78. And this one came to Victoria. It's at Gisborne. They can run it just out of the shed up this short stubborn back. The circuit of track there is for miniature railway operation, not for this. But it was in steam on this occasion. That's why we were there. Now that's an early Milliquin, Orenstein and Koppel. Plinth, I don't know, because it had been superseded for power. And it's the same loco after a fair bit of cosmetic work. And I think that's actually at Bargara Beach, that park. So Queensland spur that went into those mills. I'm not sure. That must be sugar hoppers of a different style. I think it's sugar, not any other commodity. Unless it's fertiliser or limestone coming in. Now that is not bulk rum, that's ethanol. Because during COVID, a lot of distilleries morphed into delivering sanitizer. It was made using the same equipment, the same processes. So now we are at Fairymead at last. I'm using the sequence of the map shows, and the lighting here was really hard to get right when I was doing the post-processing for this presentation, and I discovered, I think I know why. It was so absolutely vile. We parked our combi van with the headlamps on, and the distortion is coming because it's lit by car headlamps. So you can get an idea of the real nature of the light from the sheds behind it. And that particular one came to Victoria. And there it is at Wantirna, same project we saw earlier. I've not in the same place in the screening because it came from a different mill. Now to Bingra, quite famous. I've never been to Bingra Mill, but Bingra Mill supplied this very famous loco. The first wave of locos that opened QR in the 1860s, and one of them survived in steaming order at Bingra Mill and was presented back to QR and has been kept in steaming order and performed ceremonially. The black one is another survivor but wasn't steaming, but it still exists and it's been done up cosmetically, but no longer at Roma Street. It's at Ipswich. And so here we are, the Bingra Loco out on the main line. That's the Kuranda line. It didn't steam from Brisbane. It was railed or trucked up, and it ran shuttles during the whole week of centenary celebrations. I was there. Went up specially. Bingra again. This one now at Coal Creek. Quinaba. It's interesting. Oh, because it's in a park. I didn't have it with Quinaba Mill in a park. And we jumped to Marsden. Gingin this time, and I think it's the only shots I've got of Gingin for this presentation. They're both ex-Gingin, and they've both, of course, gone elsewhere because Marsden folded or was closed or evicted, or I think it's still there as the power station, but not the railway. Still in the Bundaberg area. ISIS from James. Looking like a recabbed DH. The bogies, I think, are the clue. Just a token one here, replica this, but it ran on a light railway further up the river to bring stuff to transship onto barges or boats. And it can run on this wharf trackage. Right, just about everybody's favourite, because it was accessible, the complex Nambour area, all gone now, all closed, but it had interesting technology, it was accessible, lots of locos, it linked to the Mapleton tramway, so it could justify a whole presentation of its own, where several of our members are Nambour experts. So it's got two of these lifting bridges, one over the main Maroochy River and the other's over a lesser waterway, but they're both lifting, cranked up, not as sophisticated as Murray River bridges, but they're there. I had to grab that one, the riverboat passing underneath. And this is taken from the tower of the lifting span. Lovely vantage point. That's a duplicate, really. Brad's and Bruce's are the same thing. And this one was sent to me by Bruce Cook as a birthday card. If you read the garage label on the right. And then through the streets of Nambour. Now the tracks have remained. The mill site itself has been redeveloped as a shopping mall, and the proprietors are trying to organise a tram, a purpose-built diesel tram through this street trackage. It's not come to fruition yet, but we believe it hasn't stalled completely. It's a work in progress and will happen. An interesting triple stub point. I don't think that's common. I don't even recall seeing stub points that were a pair, let alone a triple. Right, my own photos now. Valdora is a rare Dick Kerr, and it did once haul cane on the Valdora line, but in my time, as far as I know, its sole use was to propel the weed-destroying wagon. I'm not sure whether it was a burner or a poison wagon. I've seen both styles on cane railways, but this was out of season and they weren't even doing works. It was just... And of course, the one that's dear to our hearts, that was one of two, I think. The Mapleton Tramway Shay went to Ipswich and was done up and on display, and now it's back in Nambour in a museum in Nambour, but it's not restored to steaming order. I'm watching Frank dissolve into tears. And so, and there's the mill site today, well, a few years ago, because there's now a shopping centre on it. A couple of street scenes. And now to ANGRMS. This was fairly raw, although they were formed in 71 and they've been going for 15 years. They're really only just getting established on their site at the time I visited, but a lot of things have been restored, renovated, and it looks quite flourishing now, but it's close enough to Brisbane to get the passengers, and it's got a nice website. So just a couple. I was on riding trams, last day of trams, last week of trams. I'd been there for the closing of the Northern system, and I'd stayed on and just happened to be going, and there was a factory Christmas picnic with portable track and a rather nice steam loco. And Gold Coast, that's still functioning, I think. That's Currumbin Bird Sanctuary. And across the border into honorary Queensland, the Tweed section of New South Wales is very much aligned to Brisbane and had cane. That's Crabs Creek, where the cane from other areas came in by New South Wales Railway, got transferred to the mill trackage here. Now, there's two mills there. I never understood that. I've been past Condong, but there's also Harwood. And it's interesting, that was a cane... that hauled cane barges on the Clarence, which is strange because the mills are served by the Tweed. I may have the river name wrong, or Clarence cane may have come by New South Wales from there. But it wasn't a paddle boat when it was on the Clarence. That was done when it went into private hands in South Australia as a Murray River boat. And that concludes the Queensland coverage without Fiji. I didn't apologise at the start, but what I thought would accommodate both Queensland roads to fill the program, but so I should just enough of a come back next year, folks, to see Fiji, and just I think 2 shots. So very much Queensland, not even in disguise. It was owned by CSR, so tradition lived on in Fiji when modernity was coming to Queensland. And I think if I've put in a marker, yes, that's all, folks. I shall stop the sharing. And it's back to our host of the evening to organise proceedings now.
Yeah. Thank you, Rod, for that presentation. Most interesting. It brought back some memories for me too, because as an apprentice in the Victorian Railways, I used to get free passes when I was on annual leave, and 2 years in a row I went up to Cairns. and poked around some of the sugar tramways up there. That was most fascinating. And of course, Nambour, you said that's being so close to Brisbane, it was quite easy to go and visit it. Yes, and you're right about what Veldora and the Shay from Nambour. I saw them probably about 2 years ago, and when I met Clive Plater up there, and they look in good order. And the Shay actually looks like you could light a fire in it. Looks that good. I'm not sure about that, but anyway, thank you very much for all that. Any questions? Push the space bar if you want to talk.
I only want to point out, I didn't realize that such incredible amount of sugar industry with steam was in Queensland. A great presentation. I'm really delighted.
Gunter is
Not-
Gunter is
from Germany.
our member from, or our participant from Germany. Welcome, Gunter.
Hey,
Nigel and Beth Holmes here. Thank you, Rod, for that presentation. It was great. I was just going to add a little bit of information to make the members aware that we've been involved with Illawarra Light Railway Museum Society here in Albion Park, and they were the recipients of cans.
Right.
And I remember when we got the Loco, it apparently held the record tonnage of cane. They actually put a load on behind cans and to make the record. Now I don't know if it's 900 tons. I know it's something like that, but it was a record tonnage that was hauled by CSR Townsville, and it was recorded. And I saw cans in a couple of the shops, one in the shed, and I thought I saw one out on a siding on a train. So just a little bit of information there to add to your presentation there.
Yeah, thanks.
No other questions? Surely not.
Now have a look at the chat then and see what's come up on the chat.
Yeah, I might just read through some of them there. From Floyd Bromley talking about
Huh?
the purpose-built tourist mine in the middle of town. Main mine too was shut down after a woman broke her ankle. The photo of Calamia is dual gauge, not triple.
Oh, sorry, 3 rails. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
And then on the 3 surviving Mackay mills are Farley, Racecourse, and Marion. Closed since 1988 are Plaistow, North Eden, and Cattle Creek. And that's from John Browning. Those hoppers that you're wondering what they were for, I forget which mill it was, but Tom Badger is saying that they were cement hoppers.
Ah, construction stuff.
Yeah. And also Thomas said that cane from Crabs Creek went to Condong via the New South Wales Railways.
Oh, it was the other way round. Right.
Yeah. And John Browning is saying the Clarence River Mill was Broadwater. No loco traffic, no loco tramway there at all.
Just cane barges. Right.
Yep. People are complimenting you on your presentation and looking forward to Fiji, as am I. Bob Stonehouse is asking, first he congratulates you on a fascinating presentation, but he's intrigued by the name Ingham. Is that named after the village of Ingham in West Suffolk, UK? It is near where he grew up.
Ah,
I'm sure if
highly
anyone
likely.
highly likely it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ingham was on a branch line between Thetford and Bury St Edmunds. Bury St Edmunds, Suffolk, Thetford, just inside Norfolk. It was a branch line which closed in 1953 to passengers and completely to freight in 1960. I think there was one station at a place called Barnum, which was quite near an RAF depot, which I'm told actually housed nuclear weapons. I can't vouch for that. But a number of place names that I've noticed in Australia are very familiar to me as a native of Suffolk. Ipswich and Newmarket, for example.
Oh yeah, they're all over the place. The
Yeah,
colonial.
that's right. But you know, you can just imagine where people came from. So if it is named after Ingham and West Suffolk, I just wonder who did it. That's interesting. But
early
anyway,
settlers.
changing the subject, what's the situation with these sugar railways nowadays? Do they still exist?
Oh
Because
yes,
most of the pictures were some time ago.
we had a great presentation from John 2 years ago of the huge strides with modernisation, rationalised. But what has remained is not toy train at all. Full mainline standards, bigger locos, heavier weight rail. It has to survive economically in the modern world of competition. So they're less accessible. The mills have gone through the OH&S path, but they're still very important. And the traffic that's carried on them, I remember stats once, the cane railways in Queensland carried more freight per year than the whole of Victorian Railways, my own big broad gauge state.
That'd be right. Yeah. The other thing about a lot of the modern tramways up there in Queensland, they've got larger rail, concrete sleepers, and they have, and a lot of their track building and track maintenance work is all mechanised. It is serious work. It's as serious as, say, a standard gauge railway.
I think they're the main comments, although Jeff from my old hometown of Warrigal obviously knows a little bit of German. Whatever Herzlich, I think I know Herzlich Willkommen, Gunther.
Hearty welcome means hearty welcome.
Hearty welcome. There you go.
I'm married to a German, so that's why.
Okay.
Herzlich willkommen.
Um,
Oh, Chaz is here. Oh, I certainly.
Go on, Rod. You're right.
No, just
I'll say a few things about Bundaberg. Firstly, the Orenstein and Koppel that you showed there, interesting engine. It was never down near the water. It was at Kendall's Flat, just over the Kennedy Bridge, which is the old girder bridge there. A chap called Jeff Pritchard had a bit of a loose end, and he's a boilermaker, and he took the thing to bits and said, I can fix this. And he did, and it runs on the Bundaberg Tramway Society there over at North Bundaberg at the moment. It's one of the ones that, it's coming back into service at the moment, because as one of the drivers who drives up there, I can tell you what it's like on a summer's day, and that thing's cab. It's no joke. But the other thing I'd just like to say about Bundaberg, which is to the side of what Roderick's been talking about tonight, we've found an underground loco up there. There was a mill in Fiji, had sort of fallen to bits. It was one of the ones over on the eastern side of the island that didn't do so well. And some wheeler dealer up there thought, oh, there are 5 mills, which there were in those days, and he would buy the thing and obviously sell it. No one was interested. It was a little Decauville or Decaville, whatever you want to call it. And eventually he conned Milliquin into storing it there, thought he might have a foot in the door, and eventually they buried it. But the good news is that a few years ago they found the boiler of it, and a few weeks ago, while Milliquin was doing some drainage work, they found the frames of it. Now, I've told John Browning and John Knowles about this, but I don't think anyone's going to rebuild the engine, but we probably will take the frames over there to North Bundaberg and display them along with a few other things there. So it's a light railway relic. But yeah, that's the story, and that's the thing of Bundaberg. The Invicta is certainly one of the engines we have there. The other one is the Bundaberg Fowler number 3. The only one that was ever built is an 042 tank. The others were all 062s. And I think Roderick was saying that they were pretty efficient. They certainly were. One of the reasons being that they were roller bearings, or roller bearing axle boxes anyway. They're not in Norfolk and Western. We didn't have roller bearing big ends or anything like that, but they were very, very efficient engines, yeah. The Perrys there were not bad either. They had a bad name actually when they came there, and they eventually got sent to Quinaba. And one of the loco fitters there took a look at them and said, this thing's got blasting problems, and he built a petticoat, and they were very good engines after that. They used to waltz up Windermere there where you had the picture of the two engines. So yeah, anyway, all very, very interesting stuff, and yeah, we'll see where we go. So thanks for the time.
Yeah. Nigel and Bev here again. Just want to ask a question. Rod, do you have any information? There was a series of photos of rolling stock, ventilated timber wagons. You didn't really say much. Do you know what they were used for?
Innisfail Tramway, government operated, and we have a book. There's a book out on the Innisfail Tramway, and I imagine that will cover them all. So it was running as much more than sugar. But I won't try and fish it out. We've got limited minutes here, but I've got one. I've got a copy. I don't know who published it. I don't think it's one of ours. It predates us almost. It's a pretty early publishing in the railway hobby. Yeah.
Rod, I think I can fill you in there. It was put out by the ARHS Queensland Division, and Jerry Verhoeven and John Armstrong were the two authors.
Well-respected authors.
Rod.
Yeah.
That book was republished in a revised form by the LRRSA in about it was 2000, and it's still available, and it's very comprehensive.
So Nigel, I think it's got drawings in it of those wagons.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
Yeah, Bob Goff, just like I nearly lost my finger button here. A couple of years ago, I was in Mackay and losing everything. And anyway, I photographed two of the DH locomotives going south from Serena, and they had 300 wagons behind them, which is quite something. I got a movie of it, the whole train going through, so it's rather interesting. And also, it's saying about, locos pulling big loads. The Melbourne loco, which was now at our museum at Woodford, was sent west. A diesel had broken down with his train on, and Melbourne hooked up and brought the whole lot back to the mill, Victoria Mill, and I believe it was 1,000 tonne of cane plus the diesel loco. So that's a pretty good load for a steamer. She was a good worker, Melbourne.
Good stuff. All right. Is that it? Okay. Look, thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in today. Oh, tonight. Oh, depends where you are in the world. And Rod, thank you again for your presentation. By the responses we received, it was thoroughly enjoyed, and like probably a number of people, it brought back old memories.
It
So
was certainly
great.
Nostalgia supreme.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Mike.
Bill, just before you close off, could I just mention two things? One is that the next meeting is actually in a month's time. You would have got an email today, everyone. Just a coincidence in terms of dates, but Jeff Maynard will be speaking on the Britannia Creek area here in Victoria. The other thing is I'm still looking for one more presentation to complete next year. It'll be in December, and it would be great if someone could put their hand up. It could be a slide show, it could be a video, it could be anything that you think might be of interest. And plenty of help would be available to help, how it gets presented and the like, but we need one more to complete all the slots out to December next year. Thanks, Bill.
All right. Thanks, Mike. All right. Once again, thank you for all attending, and I bid you all good night.
Thank you very much indeed for a very pleasant end of the morning. All the very best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rod. Good night, everybody.
Oh, no, see
Yeah,
you all.
thanks, Rod.
Good night,
Great.
down under.
Yeah.
See you again.
Thanks, Gunter. Bye,
Cheers all.
Gunter.
Night all.
Cheers.
Tschüss.
Well done, Rod.
Thanks.
It was great.
Stay to the end, yes.
It was
I have
really
a lot
good.
of memories.
Yeah, I could see that, and that came through and it added to it. So nothing wrong with that. It really isn't. And no, it was terrific. I really enjoyed it. Can't wait for Fiji. I went to Fiji a number of years ago now, and it was the bridge that got wiped out there that they had to close the line south
Yep.
of it.
I've got a photo of it.
Big pun.
I think I've got a photo of it.
Is it Latoka?
No, Toka's not a bridge. No, it's Sigatoka.
Sigatoka, that's it. Yeah. And anyway, it was before it was washed away or broken or whatever. And I remember seeing trains operating to the south of that,
Yeah.
and including at night with headlights and everything, and it was remarkable. So I'm looking forward to Fiji. But look, that was great. I was going to send you an email, but I won't. I'll just say it now. It was just a really well put together presentation that just kept our interest all the way through. So thank you so much for that.
And you may notice it was 2 minutes under my predicted 70.
Well, look, I could tell. To me, one, for pure selfish reasons, but if I can make the kind of arrogant assumption that I'm just typical rather than ick of something, I was really enjoying it, so it wouldn't have mattered even if it went a bit longer. It was holding interest, and and I knew from the time you're spending on each slide that you'd worked it all out. I thought, well, whatever it's going to be okay. So it was really good. So appreciate your time and effort, and looking forward very much to April next year when it's Fiji.
Get to work on it. I've got 2 other presentations away from our club before then.
Yeah, I'm in that world too, in a different neck of the woods to you, maybe, or maybe it's related. But this year's I've got about 3 lined up this year, including one next Friday. But I think for about 6-7 years up to 2023, I was doing around 8 a year, and that's hard work.
8 different presentations, or the same presentation to a different group?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because what I got to a number of years before that was that I've got a repertoire. I've got a range of presentations, and unless it's a new territory that I haven't presented on before, then they need to pick one of the ones I've already done, because of what it's like putting them together.
Oh yeah,
it's a lot of work. And so yeah, it's the great thing these days is you can get your presentation all sorted, all there, and your notes are all there. You just got to run through it a few times, and you're all set to go. But yeah, I was doing a lot of them. But this year it's 3 or 4. I think I've already done one. I got another one next week. Yeah, I think it's 2 more. I think it'll be 4 this year.
Has Parramatta Malvern got hold of you yet to do one of their historic? They do 2 a year.
No. But I'm hoping to have Erica out next year, and there'll be another batch of them following that. I'll do one for here too, I think. Maybe a couple, one on the out on the Tyers Valley and one on the Thompson.
The question I was going to ask, I was aware of it only today. 2 of those locos went to private operation in Victoria.
Okay.
And they're steamable. I'd never heard of that one. It's Flowerdale, no, one of those places.
Oh, you mentioned Straths Creek.
Yeah,
I'd never heard of it.
I hadn't either. So
In fact, I said to myself, I'm going to, once Rod's finished, I'm going to go over to Google Earth and see what I can find.
yeah,
at
because
Straths
that would be
Creek.
certainly a worthwhile visit for us as a group. If
Absolutely,
if
yeah.
they're not stone wall, closed off, ferocious, they could
Yeah.
be quite welcoming.
They might be. You might not be able to ride on it because
Oh, the health
insurances kill things these days. But
doesn't it kills anything?
yeah, it does. Well, for example, we've got a, I think Bill alluded to it, that we've got a visit up to Mulwala explosives factory
Right.
later in the year. And to look at what's remained, there's nothing operating there anymore. But on the second day, I suggested to Simon, who's organising it, he should look at Wombat Gully at Leneva.
Yep.
And
We've been there before.
yeah, I've been there before too, and I've ridden behind the loco, or one of the locos they've manufactured. And anyway, they've come back and they're dead keen. But it's been, insurances have made that very difficult. But and they said that we'll be able to have a trip behind their little diesel loco, which is good. You know, we'll do that. But he's going back to see what can be organised regarding the steam. Even if we can't travel on it, if they might operate it so that we could take photos. Personally, that's just as good, if not better.
Yeah.
So we'll see what can be done, because it's a wonderful thing they created there with, I think they were winch engines they made them out of, but they look so good. Yeah.
I don't know the family of Warwick Turner at all well.
Mm.
They promised to maintain the family farm there of steam locos.
Mm.
I don't know how easy it is to organise a visit. I'd have to work through a mutual friend if that became a desire, is to visit that site.
Count it as a desire. We'll work it in somehow. I mean, that'd be we'd get a good number along to that, because it's just not known,
Right, yeah, it is private.
Yeah, it is.
And I don't know to what extent the children and the friends are keeping the steam equipment, the maintenance and the development, because they were doing the steaming when I was there. So it wasn't a one-man show in terms of operation. They all had the skills.
Yeah, yeah. Well, inquire, because it'd be very interesting to.
We'll use the same mutual friend, which has got us in for a club visit. That was the South Australian Boat Group, that visit. They had a rally at Echuca.
Yeah, I've never seen. I was aware of stuff at Echuca somewhere. That's the first time I've seen a photograph of it.
That's the major site. There's another one I discovered in trying to do all my homework for the captions for this.
Mm.
There's a couple of others that might be one-offs.
Okay.
Whereas that's a cluster.
Yeah, it is. Something in the air up there. What must be all those paddle steamers creating something? Yeah.
No, well, it's a dry climate. Way back, we were talking of relocating the ARHS Museum to Echuca.
Yeah.
1970s when I was on council.
Yeah.
And one of the two reasons, the government would give money to regional development, not to Melbourne.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was the dry climate, not
would have done it
the
well.
salt air.
Not only dry, but away from the sea air. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And we had the site because there was the engine shed bit as the core part of it.
Yeah.
That never came to anything, but yes, that climate helps.
It does, yeah. Anyway, look, I'll let you go, but I'll raise my glass to you.
Oh, yeah.
You've got yours. Cheers.
Right. No, it was a great evening, and it was worth the effort, and I loved the feedback at the end, all the extra little bits to add to it.
Yeah, yeah. No, people, I could really tell they loved it. It was great. So thanks very much, Rod, and I'm looking forward to Fiji.
Right then. That's it.
Good on you.
I shall leave before you shut me out.
Okay. Bye.